It's Friday, Feedback Friday, the feedbackiest day of the week. Hi, it's Feedback Friday, and this Feedback Friday, I have some things to show you guys. It's the Song of Sparkle Muffin demo. We're not going to spend the whole time on this, but it does exist. Here it is. The sounds are going to drive people crazy at first, but here we are. And here we go. We can explore. Here we go. We can explore and do things. We're still working a few bugs out on this sucker. But yes, it exists and will be in the hands of backers soon. So yes, I will spend all time doing this, but it does exist. It is coming. What is happening right now? Let's go to me. Yeah, is that we got everything done, and then I realized we wanted a feedback form for people to share their thoughts about the demo, and, breakdown, audio, ease of use, all that stuff. And I have to do that, and I haven't done that yet. So that's the only holdup, because it's going to be really frustrating if there's a form at the end of the demo to a form that's not complete. So that's what we're waiting on now, and I will do that over the weekend, and so you guys will have that next week, and I'm super excited. That version you saw was with the cathode ray tube monitor simulator turned on. There's a way to not turn it on as well if you find that hard on your eyes. So let's get to your feedback for the week. It's going to be a few comments for the Benevolent Sexism video. Because it's going to be kind of short by Feedback Friday standards, because I've had no time this week. It was jam-packed because of this and a few other things. So if you like this content, help support this channel, become a monthly patron, patreon.com/Leanna K. Patron support helps me pay more attention to these videos, to this content, or buy a one-time Leanna Care session for someone who can't afford it. Coffee.com/Leanna K. Again, Leanna Care signups, link in the description box if you want one-on-one attention. Met a few new people this week. It was really cool. They're super cool people. People always look at me like I've grown another head when I say, this is really exciting for me, and thank you for giving me a chance. It's going to be awesome to work with you. And they're like, this is a little weird, but not unpleasant. So Benevolent Sexism. Yeah, I forget how much people are interested in this topic until I talk about it. And ironically, J.K. Rowling got mad at me for calling her out on Benevolent Sexism. That was pretty great, because I pointed out that, single-sex spaces for safety, like bathrooms, they don't actually benefit women. Because if women have to be removed from public spaces because public spaces aren't safe and pushed into the cloisters of women's bathrooms and women's and other things, because, big scary men, nobody has to protect the men from other men, just the women from men, that infringes on women's public participation. Public spaces must be safe for everyone. And if something's not safe for women, it's probably not safe for men. And so this idea, we'll just keep the women folk in this women's only place. And so public spaces are for people, and these spaces are for women. But if you want to come out in the public space, you can, ladies. It's just not safe, right? That is the element of benevolent sexism that is not faced by men. And that's why in the traditional model, I'm not saying I agree with this, it's just in the traditional model, there isn't benevolent sexism against men. And this came up in a lot of questions that were good questions. I think it is important to challenge all models, including patriarchy, whether it's really doing us any good, applying it to, the modern West. But, one commenter said, with regular sexism, I'll turn the sound down now because we don't need this. With regular sexism, I would argue that the person doesn't really care if we're doing something good. That's right. They just think that how things are. Oh, women are bitches. Women lie. Men are all rapists. Men are predators. Yes, that's just hostile sexism. I know it's not nice, but it's true, right? But someone who does benevolent sexism thinks they're actively doing something good and struggles with the idea that they aren't, sometimes to the point of aggression against the people who call them out. And that is the thing. Benevolent sexism turns into hostile sexism fast. But this commenter went on with a very apt point. Many men use it as a moral high ground to separate themselves from openly sexist men. But the minute women call them out on their actions, they go on the offensive against them and dismiss them entirely because in their head, they have the moral high ground. What ends up happening is that they respect women until they fall out of line, then all gloves are off. Welcome to my career as a games journalist. That wasn't in the comment. That was me. You see in cases like Vouch, who called Galatea a slut for disagreeing with him. You see cases like Hassan, who by his own admission assumed that a black woman was a piece of shit until she agreed with him in that embarrassing Piers Morgan debate. Yeah, I've had my own run-ins with Hassan. That dude is sexist as fuck. And this isn't just done by men. Many women do this a lot. Recently, I've noticed a trend in feminist subreddits where they would bring up suicide statistics by demographic when they see that men are the majority of suicide victims, but women are the majority of suicide survivors. Their interpretation of the data is that women use less violent methods of suicide because men are naturally more considerate of other people and thus don't want to bother or traumatize them. Women are naturally more considerate of other people and thus don't bother or traumatize those to find their bodies. They say this as if they're saying that women who survive suicide attempts did it because they are incredibly kind during their darkest times. But what they are really doing is saying that male suicide victims are naturally inconsiderate and self-absorbed, which is why they succeeded their suicide attempts more than women. It's disgusting interpretation of the data. In an attempt to put women on a pedestal, they ended up insulting, dismissing, and desecrating male victims, sometimes intentionally, because they use this argument to dismiss men's struggles. They boil a complex matter with many variables into a binary of women kind, men selfish. Right. And it's funny because the whole suicide dichotomy has come up a lot this week. And, this idea that the various narratives we put on the data. And when you analyze data, you have to be real careful not to graft your own assumptions on. Now, it is true that the completed suicides are far more, far higher in men than in women. And that is often because of the method used to attempt suicide. And women are more likely to use pills. Men are more likely to use things like guns, etc., etc. And it's not that it's any less messy if you find someone who died of a drug overdose. It's that there is a window of opportunity to flush the drugs out of their system. And this is why, I'm a pariah absolutely everywhere, because I will actually go and check these assumptions, and that really complicates narratives behind things like, suicide stuff and the Duluth model and all those things. The big problem with the Duluth model is the whole gendered power and control theory really goes out the window when you look at the very high statistics of intimate partner violence among lesbian couples. And the benevolent sexism thing definitely, the most likely group to be a victim of intimate partner violence is, believe it or not, bisexual women. Way more than straight women, way more than gay women, bisexual women. Which that and bisexual erasure and the hostility towards bisexual people in both, the really militant gay camps and the, straight or you're going to hell camps. I mean, this is stuff we got to talk about. We got to look at the data and go, all right, why? The way I came at talking about suicide was actually through survivors of first responders. And, what we say in those circles is every suicide is preventable. And that is an important thing to keep in mind. If we quibble about, oh, well, men are just inconsiderate about how they kill themselves. Like, oh my God. Yikes. Because suicide, like the mindset of a suicidal person is despair. They are not thinking clearly. So that whole theory is just messed up. And a lot of these benevolently sexist, benevolently racist, benevolently homophobic, like, oh, gay men are gentler, right? No. They all just force us to not change our opinions on our assumptions on the world, right? And that's why we should always be questioning. We should always be dialoguing. We should never just sit back and go, we've got it all figured out, which is why, even though that man bear stuff was rocky, I think it was an important conversation to have because, the weaponization of benevolent bigotry, as the commenter said, weaponization of benevolent sexism, even among the advocates of this group, of a given group, it's very important to constantly challenge. Now, you challenge feminist orthodoxy, you end up like me, canceled, which is why your Patreon support is so very important for this stuff, because there is no funding right now for this kind of stuff. It's all through very, very rigid orthodoxies. And you either have to be under the women's umbrella or the LGBTQ umbrella. You can't be under both. And the weird backlash, the normalization backlash where, the original homeless shelters were for men. The cropping up of these shelters during the Depression for men who, kind of abandoned their families because various reasons, because they had no jobs and they had no prospects. And, the mom went to live with family and the dad was just, obviously those weren't places suited to take women. And so we got homeless shelters and we got women's shelters. Right. And the homeless shelters are men's spaces, but they're still there. It's just, we don't call them men's shelters. And this sounds like, oh, well, that's proof society privileges women. No, it shows that there was the thing, and then we need the women's thing. And I hear that in the manosphere all the time, that all these things for women show that society privileges women. And it's not true. First of all, women's shelters are not nice places. They are homeless shelters. But also, it's because it came second and it needed the label women's because it wasn't the default. Otherwise, we'd have women homeless shelters and men's homeless shelters, right? And then the specifics of domestic violence intervention, that came about because of the fact that women were financially dependent in a way that men weren't. And more, that is not the case. That is something that has changed significantly because, two incomes are often required to get by. Even, the separated dad apartment that used to be, the really sad, shitty apartment that the guy got because the marriage was broken up. You can't even afford that anymore. So more and more men are staying in abusive circumstances because of money. Some also don't know that family shelters, places where you can take your children, many of them take men with kids as well. That's why they're family shelters. Um, but there are a lot of comments here, but I'll find another one really quick. Okay, this is a fair correction. Personally, I don't think it's specifically white women who have this attitude that they're meant to be babied and protected. I think it's more middle to upper middle class women in general, which I forget what OFC means, but OFC biases the distribution along racial lines. I actually just, and that, okay, it probably does have more to do with class, though that's a complicated one. So yes, I agree that it biases the distribution to white women, but it is not exclusively white women. Fair. I actually disagree that guys don't experience benevolent sexism. The assumption that all guys are capable and don't need protection or help can be seen as benevolent. Guys are assumed to be strong and not need support because they're guys. Guys that are more soft and supportive get screwed by this, even though our society sees thinking of people like this as complimentary. See, I think that's actually, like I said, hopefully you understand about off the top why I said that it doesn't protect women out of society for their own good. Sexism is based on violation of gender norms. So guys who aren't the strong stereotype are labeled weak, right? That's the hostile sexism. And it isn't, oh, just sit over here, weak man. There's a safe space for you so you can be weak and protected. It's get back out there. And neither of them's right. We need to stop. I'm going to be doing a lot of content about we need to stop centering the bad men. But yeah, it takes a bit to get the mind around the concept that, yes, oh, you're so strong. Is that a benevolently sexist attitude, or is that just a social norm? Men are expected to be strong because a lot of abusive women that, and Donald Trump, throw weak at someone. You're weak. And that is incredibly damaging to men, that we equate weak with unmanly, whereas we equate weak with proper femininity, although that's a complicated one too. But any emotional vulnerability gets confused for weakness, and we have to stop that. We have to stop that for our boys, but we also have to stop that because a boy who is shamed about being weak, again and again and again, instead of having feelings validated and nurturing pro-social behaviors, that guy is the one that goes and beats up his girlfriend, right? So we have to start nurturing boys better for boys and men's sake, but we also have to nurture boys better for women's sake. And that is not saying, oh, the only reason to nurture boys is because of women. No, and I know that's a manosphere claim too every time I do it. But no, this is interest convergence, right? This is the basics of social change. This is good for men and it's good for women. And that's why I argue every feminist group should be invested in nurturing and supporting men, even though they're looking at this from advancement of women. You can't have one without the other. You cannot separate the genders. You just can't. We're all in the same ship. We rise together, we fall together, right? And thank you to the person who said to be the awesome sort that holds the door for anybody coming behind her. That's one bit of mannerisms. I love becoming normalist. I like it too, right? Another person said, thanks for the deep thoughts on this. I did have a question. It may be more of a problem of my own with characterization, but here goes. Where would the boys will be boys sort of sexism fall? If I had to describe the situation I'm thinking of, a male presenting person does something egregious or transgressive, but suffers no consequences because boys will be boys. I think it may be sexism because if a female presenting person did the same, you see more instances of variety of consequences. Thanks again. That's just a double standard. That's just that's the putting a woman up on a pedestal. This is benevolent sexism against women again. Women are more moral, right? Women are angels. So the punishments for the transgression are stronger. As opposed to boys will be boys. Well, you know, boys go up, they get dirty, they make mistakes. There's a greater idea that men are whole people and therefore fallible. Now, boys will be boys does come into excusing things like sexual harassment as well. And this is where I think a huge amount of disconnect is coming from in guarding the messaging, because the whole, as I put it, girls rule, boys drool messaging came up when there was still a lot of boys will be boys around. But the last few generations of men were not raised with the benefit of boys will be boys, right? It isn't, well, what were you thinking wearing a short skirt? Boys will be boys. Well, what did you think getting into the car with him? Of course he was going to try something. Serves you right. You know, they didn't grow up with that. And so the, you know, girl magic, the girl power stuff, with a decline in boys getting those passes, we're just super fucking tough on everybody now. And it's not right. But because this shift has happened, but not equally, because we're not applying the we all rise together, we all fall together, a lot of men have been left with this message that they're inferior, or the world sees them as inferior, because it's the idea that women are just better. And that is something that is an overcorrection that we have to watch. And that's why this, you know, it may think that, oh, that benefits men. But remember, in that, boys are the default. Boys are human and therefore make mistakes. Whereas girls are angels and are supposed to be morally flawless. That's the benevolent sexism there. I fought this idea of benevolent sexism only affects women for years and years and years. It, you know, when I was in university, first, like, oh my God, no, there has to be something. But it really does come from the fact that all public spaces were originally designed only for men in mind. Government, anything. Because women were supposed to just stay at home. You lived with your fathers until you got married, and then you lived with your husband. And so we're still, you know, the working world and the air conditioner wars, right? For instance, the whole men went out to fight because women stayed at home, and that a lot of people see that as disposable male syndrome, but it was actually women were considered incapable. You see how it all works? And that's why I'm saying it's all connected. It's all, we rise together, we fall together. So another way to look at it is, for every sexist attitude about women, for instance, there's a shadow. There's something that flips around and nails men, right? The benevolent sexism idea that women are angels has become all men are predators. So most victims are women. So it's a woman problem. Well, men are predators, right? For everything. The hostile sexism against men that a lot of feminists say all men are predators. Well, that suggests that all women are potential victims. And no, I don't want to live in this world. You see how it works? If there's ever this idea that one thing is, just inherently better or worse, or even inherently different, and any individual that doesn't conform to that binary is weird and needs to be corrected. That hurts everybody. Period. End of story. And I think that with that message, you get entrance convergence and you get opt-in, as opposed to this shit that's everywhere that's just not working. Right. And I think that's really contributed to the loneliness epidemic. Somebody asked about, there's been a lot of people who think they're too late to date. Like their 30s, their 40s. Oh, it's too late. Everybody's taken. I can't meet anybody now. I have no experience. It's not true, but this is something so tender that I'm afraid to do it in a video because I don't want to accidentally trigger someone. So that's what Leanna Cares is for. That's what, something like this, we could do a discussion group. We could do a workshop. I'm still working on formatting with this, but that's my time. I am out of it. Help support this channel. Become a monthly patron, patreon.com/Leanna K. Become a patron. Monthly support helps. Or you can sign up to be a monthly coffee supporter as well. Coffee.com/Leanna K. Buy a one-time Leanna Cares session for someone working on this stuff who can't afford it. There are more and more people that just cannot afford anything right now. Money's tight. So coffee.com/Leanna K. Thanks for watching. Great feedback and have a great weekend.